This is a different style of video, and it's a subject that I've already spoken on before on many occasions in the past, and I feel as though it's time for a revival. This pertains to my disappointment with the final season of The Mandalorian, or at least the majority of it. Opinions are subjective, and while some people enjoyed Season 3, others, including myself, found it to be a letdown. I was disappointed from the outset when they retconned crucial events from Season 2 and undermined the character development of the Mandalorian, only to subsequently sideline him for the majority of Season 3, replacing him with Bo-Katan. I explained at length why I disliked how this was done, episode for episode, but what I did not expect were for shills to come out of the woodwork and bend over so far forward so that Disney could tickle their sacks just for putting me in my place for daring to say anything negative about their precious Star Wars franchise. I have always been honest about the fact that I am not a Star Wars fan. At the behest of my viewers, I finally watched the first movie recently. That is the only other Star Wars thing I have watched outside of The Mandalorian. It was okay. I wouldn't say it was the best space movie or sci-fi movie or whatever genre it falls in that I've ever watched, but it was sweet, and I understand that it was a technological achievement for its time, and I appreciate that. A lot of people have been telling me to watch the other works of Star Wars, but I haven't done so for a very important reason, and that's because I realize I would fall in love with another franchise that would ultimately go nowhere or end up in flames due to current events. It's different when you start out with something and you stick with it to the end, and then it starts to change while you're already along for the ride. But if I already know where it's going, why would I want to become invested in that? Now, there's one comment in particular that was left on my review video of one of the Mandalorian episodes that I'll be responding to. Not because I have anything personal against this person, but because it was the longest comment that basically echoed the same sentiment that a lot of the other hardcore fans echoed. And so when I address it or speak as though I'm addressing the person who wrote this, I'm actually addressing everyone who shares the same sentiment. Why am I making a video just for this? Well, it's for the same reason I made similar videos for the Godzilla community and for the Jurassic Park community. As someone who enjoys the new Godzilla MonsterVerse movies and is a big fan of Jurassic Park, I've observed a recurring pattern. Whenever I express my concerns regarding the quality of writing or structure in the more recent films compared to some of the older ones, I am frequently criticized for not being a true fan. And the reason why this triggers me so much is because it reminds me eerily of the cult of Christianity that I left. Now, before everyone gets all upset, this is not to attack anyone's belief. This is just my personal experience. I really don't care what religion you are. If you believe, you just believe, just like I just don't. Growing up in a Pentecostal home with a hyper-religious mother and constantly around the church, my love for God was unmatched. But the minute I wanted to get to know the Holy Spirit more, and I actually sat down and thoroughly read through the Bible in its entirety and started asking questions, was the minute that the loving, smiling community that was so family-oriented with open arms became a completely different and malicious entity. It was the minute that I started getting warnings from people, including my mother, because I was dangerously asking certain questions. What I found particularly alarming was the similarity between some of the things that these Christian individuals said and the language used by cultish fans of certain franchises, such as, "You're thinking too much. Everything doesn't have to make sense. Just have faith. You're only concentrating on the negative and you're misinterpreting it," and so on and so forth. "You're not speaking like someone who's the true follower of Christ." Then when I became atheist, just like the fans of the movie franchises, there were whispers claiming that I was never really a Christian in the first place, or I did it wrong. The minute that you're persecuted, ostracized, or condescendingly patronized by members of a community, when you start asking questions about that community or pointing out flaws in the logic of that community, is the minute that I hope you realize that you're in a cult, a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object, or way of thought, otherwise known as a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. Another definition is a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing, an obsession, and idolization. And dare anyone start to point out the flaws in this specific obsession. That is the moment you will see the cult followers become irrationally irate and offended at the person for simply disagreeing with them Because how dare they have their own mind? How dare they have the audacity? How dare you question their deity? So I address this comment, which represents the overarching sentiment shared by many. I hope to convey why this kind of thinking is hazardous and creates more divisiveness than unity. My intention is to highlight how we can foster a better society by cultivating a greater sense of tolerance towards one another, but better yet, speaking up for everyone's right to their own mind and opinions of a work that they pay to consume. I will preface that I might say some things that are offensive, because one thing I'm not about to do is allow other people to order me around or try to ham-fist or force me to convert to their system of beliefs, no matter what it entails. I will always push back, seeing that I never did growing up. Now that I can freely have my voice to do so, I will do so with conviction in the name of freedom to think differently. My fight is not at anyone personally, but at this hive mind and mentality that nobody has the right to think differently or disagree with the collective of a gatekeeping franchise fandom for whom the companies of said franchises don't even care about. So without further ado, let's read the representative comment, and after having read it, I state my response, and I can confidently say that my response will be representative of many people who feel the same way that I do. I don't care if the fans like something or dislike something, but merely ask to be respected as their own entity, just to simply have the freedom to have their own opinion and not be forced to convert to that of someone else's. So the comment reads, quote, "No, sorry, real talk now. You were just 99% talking about negatives, when there were many positives. You just either don't acknowledge them because you've already written off the season as bad, or you don't notice them because you haven't watched anything Star Wars besides the show. But you demand everything makes sense for you, even though it's a spin-off and you haven't watched the main thing yet, or anything else Star Wars apart from the show." Quick correction there, I did watch the first movie, but understandably this person probably wouldn't know that. Anyways, continuing, quote, "Like, Bo-Katan is not some random female badass who got created just to steal Din's spotlight. She's an already established character with a backstory and previous character arc that makes it entirely plausible why she plays the role in the show now. Did you know that? Do you even care? Like, I'm not the only one who has mentioned that in your comments, and yet I don't have a feeling it got through to you. I'm not saying you have to stop watching the show, but please just stop pretending you know or understand certain things and characters when there are huge gaps in your background or knowledge. Hate me for what I wrote if you want, but I'm not a hater. I'm not trying to offend you, just being honest. I really enjoyed your content before, but this? Just complaining and complaining about stuff, throwing language and mixing it with gifs of people almost puking? This is crap. You can do better than that. Please cut that crap and go back to actual factual reviews with fair points and actually funny jokes." End quote. As a side note, completely disconnected from all of this, but in direct response to what this person just said, the reason why I've been using GIFs is because the videos are getting blocked. So I have to fill in some of the content with things other than just straight up clips from the show. So I do it with GIFs, and I found that the copyright claiming bot doesn't trigger as much when I do that. That is a reason why I do the GIFs. I would like to directly address the particular perspective in question. I want to emphasize that this is not a personal attack on anyone, despite the fact that some diehard Star Wars fans seem to have taken my review quite personally. I am pointing out issues that are specific to my experience and perspective. It feels disingenuous for you all to suggest that my lack of familiarity with the Star Wars lore invalidates my opinion of the show as a standalone piece of media. To clarify, when I referred to the new character, I meant that Bo-Katan was new to me personally and a new main character. While I acknowledge that she may have a place in the large Star Wars universe, I already knew that, I feel that her sudden prominence in the show was poorly executed and detracted from the established characters. Namely said, main character, Mando. Again, you lot with this viewpoint seem to only focus on when I have an issue about something, but me praising the entirety of the first 2 seasons completely went over your head and somehow is non-existent to you. Nobody even looks up to see if I had any reviews prior saying anything other than my ire that I'm expressing about this season. All of a sudden, you have an issue just because I'm criticizing season 3 when I've loved the show completely and had nothing but good things to say about it prior. It sounds very cultish and ignorant. Yes, I am talking about the negatives because the negatives for me outweigh the positives in this season. It's not that the previous seasons didn't have any negatives in the writing at all. Of course they did, but the difference is that the positives, again, for me, outweigh the negatives by far. And I did mention some positives as well in the review of episode 6, but it's clear many of you obviously didn't watch that video. There was one really big positive that I mentioned, but that went right over your heads, even though I focused in on that one thing. But in response to the statement, she's an already established character with a backstory and previous character arc that makes it entirely plausible why she plays this role in the show now. Did you know that? Do you even care? Like, I'm not the only one who has mentioned that in your comments, and yet I don't have a feeling it got through to you. To answer that, I already know that, and no, I don't fucking care. You know why? Because this is not the Book of Bo-Katan. Din Djarin is the character we were following from the beginning for 2 seasons. My issue is not with her character, but how they wrote her into a show that already had an established character for the show, known as the Mandalorian. Not one of the Mandalorians, not said Din Djarin, the Mandalorian. He was the main character, not Bo-Katan the Mandalorian or Bo-Katan or Boba Fett. Also, in response to the statement, I'm not saying you have to stop watching the show, but please just stop pretending you know or understand certain things and characters when there are huge gaps in your background knowledge. It almost sounds like this person is saying you don't have a right to say anything or speak or have an opinion on this. But to that I say,
okay, first of all, fuck you, motherfucker!
If viewers have to comprehend the background of characters from prior works to appreciate them in a show that is not even about them, then the writers have failed in their writing. If that were the case, we wouldn't require origin stories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and other similar franchises. While I appreciate your honesty, your logic is flawed in this matter. Your primary argument for defending the show seems to be that I lack knowledge of all the Star Wars work before, and that there were some positives in the show. I'm sorry, but I look at the big picture. I thoroughly enjoyed seasons 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian, and the only time people seem to have an issue again is when I say I don't like something. As a human being with my own opinions, I refuse to succumb to what other people want me to believe or want my opinion to be. I will always be 100% truthful, and in my honest opinion, the entire writing structure of this season was terrible. I detested it when they marginalized Boba Fett in his own show for The Mandalorian, even though I like the character of The Mandalorian. And now, I detest it that they did the same thing with The Mandalorian in his own show using Bo-Katan. And had it been vice versa, and The Mandalorian sidelined Bo-Katan in her own show, I would also be completely upset. Bo-Katan being an established character somewhere else in the Star Wars universe has no bearing on this matter. I honestly don't comprehend why this is so challenging to grasp, but please try not to take it personally. It's okay for us to have differing opinions. I don't invalidate your opinion for enjoying a poorly structured series, and you shouldn't invalidate mine for pointing out how poorly structured it is. And lastly, to the statement, this is crap. You can do better than that. Please cut the crap and go back to actual factual reviews with fair points and actual funny jokes. Now, I will be 100% honest in myself in this response, but this is highly condescending, and I hate throwing around this word because everyone overuses it, but it's also a tad bit misogynistic. How dare you come to me and patronize me and tell me what I should do to suit your likes?
So you better check yourself.
What the hell is a factual review? The fuck? Perhaps you could consider enrolling in some education classes or simply Googling the definition of the word review. I'll do you guys one better. Review. A formal assessment or examination of something with the possibility or intention of instituting change if necessary. A critical appraisal of a book, play, movie, exhibition, etc. published in a newspaper or magazine. Synonyms for the word review. Criticism, critique, assessment, evaluation, examination, analysis. The closest word is critique, which if you look at the definition for that is a careful judgment in which you give your opinion about the good and bad parts of something, such as a piece of writing or work of art. Do you not understand that a review is someone's opinion or perception on a work of art, statement, or subject? If reviews were factual, my dears, everybody would be saying exactly the same thing based on a cold, hard fact. Please don't presume to pretend as though you have any say over what I feel about something. That is very rude, and many of you come in here under the guise of not meaning to offend, while you know 100% that's exactly what you intend to do, or else you would not have so absent-mindedly written comments like this. If you don't want to see people's negative review of something, it is so simple to just click off and go to someone else's video or an echo chamber of content where everyone is saying exactly the same thing to get your fix from them. It is really bad platform etiquette to try and force someone to bend to your will or to have the same opinion that you have just because it bothers you. It's a you problem, and you should definitely take inventory of that. I really still can't even wrap my head around why this is an issue, and I think it all boils down to entitlement. Whether you're a Twitter cultist or a fandom cultist, how do you propose to win people to your side of the argument when you condescendingly bark orders at them to go back to making content that you only agree with and that passes for your approval? How does that help your franchise flourish by turning people off to it with your elementary behavior? It's perfectly acceptable if you opt to overlook certain writing flaws and find more positives than negatives in a particular work. No one should criticize you for having a differing opinion or for finding something enjoyable or entertaining. However, just as you're given respect for your opinions, you should also show respect towards others who might hold opposing views. At the end of the day, it shouldn't affect your personal life. And if a TV series franchise has reached a point where it is impacting you on a personal level, to the extent that you experience aggressive tendencies or an overwhelming desire to convert or control others' opinions on the matter, it is likely that you have a mental or behavioral issue that needs to be addressed. This type of behavior suggests that you have difficulty distinguishing between fantasy and reality, and between trivial matters and actual real-world problems. And again, I hate throwing this word around because so many people overuse it nowadays, but it literally makes you a bigot. Definition of a bigot: a person who is obstinately or unreasonably attached to a belief, opinion, or faction, especially one who is prejudiced against or antagonistic towards a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular group. Namely, in my case, someone who is not a true fan. With that being said, I received feedback from some of you who disagreed with my review, but didn't react as though the world was coming to an end because of my differing opinion. In fact, I had some very civil conversations with these individuals, and we respect each other's views. Thank you so much for this. It's unfortunate that the majority of the level-headed, honest, and tolerant Star Wars fans are often overshadowed by a vocal minority of cult-like and aggravating individuals. To preserve the community, more fans of the franchise need to hold these people accountable and encourage them to not take things so personally. After all, reacting in this manner only serves to harm the franchise and turn people away, which results in the franchise losing money. If you really love a franchise, there is nothing wrong with expecting the quality of that franchise to be preserved or increased. The people who love the franchise that have a problem with it want it to do well and only voice their severe criticisms when they see that the quality has fallen. That being said, I know there are fans of Star Wars who didn't like The Mandalorian at all, including the first 2 seasons, and that's completely okay too, because everyone is not required to like exactly the same thing. It's akin to someone getting personally upset with someone else because the person that they're upset with doesn't like bananas or don't like this particular batch of bananas because they're too soft or they smell too pungent, and then the first person who loves bananas goes bananas over this. I'm unsure if this message is going to resonate with anyone, but as I've done with other cult-like fans of different franchises, I feel the need to speak up about this because it's very unnecessary for people to behave this way when we consider ourselves high on the evolutionary chain of thought. This type of behavior is unappealing and it doesn't reflect well on anyone who engages in it. And it certainly doesn't reflect well on the franchise that said fans try so hard to represent. Being said, if they want to make a show about Bo-Katan, have her be her own main character instead of taking the place of the main character of a show that's not hers. And for those of you very smart people who are going to say something along the lines of, but Bo-Katan is a Mandalorian, of course, but so is Boba Fett, and he had his own show that ironically the Mandalorian ended up taking over. However, even in that show, which was structured more effectively than season 3 of The Mandalorian, as it came full circle with Boba Fett's storyline, he remained the main character throughout. If you were to remove the episodes featuring the Mandalorian, Boba Fett would have remained the main character of his show. It's worth noting that Din Djarin didn't suddenly appear in the early season and begin leading Boba Fett around, only then to become the star of the show as the new Boba Fett, because anyone can be Boba Fett, with Boba Fett serving as little more than a source of brute force occasionally. While I acknowledge that some Star Wars fans have provided background on Boba Fett's character, I also recognize that there are still several writing flaws in the Book of Boba Fett, which I've said. Despite this, I personally enjoy the show, but I do acknowledge its issues. Interestingly, I believe the primary reason I was able to enjoy the show was because I didn't have any prior knowledge of Boba Fett's character before watching it. I want to make it clear that my issue has never been with Katie Sackhoff, whom I adore, or the character of Bo-Katan. Instead, my frustration lies mainly with the studio and the showrunners, who completely changed the direction of the show and made her the main character, all while providing poor direction in the plot. Although Jon Favreau has already written season 4 of The Mandalorian, he's admitted that there's no end in sight for the show and that they don't have a grand plan for how it will end. This suggests they're essentially making it up as they go along and attempting to connect it with various spin-offs. And that's a very heavy burden to carry. Unlike comic book movies or anime based on manga, which can draw on source material to help them create a main outline and make minor changes as necessary, The Mandalorian is a completely new piece of work that requires the showrunners to weave together a cohesive story. If the main story hasn't already been written, it leaves many opportunities for plot holes, writing disasters, and structural issues, particularly when the showrunners are under pressure to put out content as quickly as possible. Keep this in mind for a Mandalorian season that has filler episodes and has this much disjointedness. Season 2 of The Mandalorian premiered in October 30, 2020, and ran until December 18, 2020. The development of Season 3 of The Mandalorian began in late April of 2020, and filming ended in 2022. I assume that they started filming because they already had a script, which started in 2020. That's what I was taught in film school. It took nearly 3 years, and after us waiting for basically 3 years, this is the best that they could give us. Sure, because everyone that loved season 1 and season 2 are suddenly mean people because they don't like season 3. After retconning Grogu to come back, most people, by the way, would not have watched Boba Fett, which they now seem to be discounting the events of anyway, and people expecting Grogu and Mando to go on more adventures together and bond because they made such a big deal of Grogu choosing to come back to him. They're just gonna sideline all of that because Bo-Katan is the new Mandalorian now. I'm really intrigued to see how the show is gonna go from here on out, if they're gonna stick to their guns and decide to go this route. I personally don't see it being successful, but maybe I'm just jaded. Regardless, I only say things that I mean. If you want or feel the need to preach to me about why my opinion is wrong, or why I should just blindly suck the proverbial dick of a series I've fallen out of love with, just because you enjoy having your throat bashed in by it day in, day out, I'll gladly remind you to consider that if I don't share your enthusiasm, that's more dick for you. Have at it and suck away. And I'll continue to do what I've always done, which is to give my honest opinion and review things that I watch. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.